right, and so glad to have you once again in the Excel if and VLOOKUP functions. We're here from 10 to 11:30 today, and again, we're going to be using the chat. So let me take my camera off. That way there you can focus on the slides, and we'll begin. All right, let's begin. So we want to tell you where the chat is, of course, first. And the chat you'll find if you're using a PC or a Mac, you'll find it at the bottom right of your screen. You'll find the chat button looking like a little balloon or possibly, just a big circle, and you'll see that chat. If you're using an iPhone, and it depends on what version, but typically you'll find it in the participant button, and then you'll find the chat looking exactly the same as you would on a PC. If you're using any other type of device, go ahead and find that chat right now. I have a couple of questions for you, so I'd love for you to be able to answer these in the chat. Have you created or work with ifs or VLOOKUP functions? And what type of data do you work with in Excel? So I'd like to know both of those answers. Have you ever created an if or VLOOKUP before? You work with them? What kind of data do you work with? And you'll find that as I look at the chat, we'll have all different levels of skills coming today in this training, which is great. So if you're a new beginner in Excel, this is probably a little too advanced for you, but stick around, feel free to look at it. If you've never used formulas before, there's some previous knowledge that you might need to know, and I'll go over that. But if you've worked with formulas before, I think you're going to be okay using ifs and VLOOKUPs. If you've worked with them before, hopefully I'll take the mystery out of them. And if you've never worked with them before, I'll tell you the reason why you might want to do so. So I'm looking at the chat, and as I mentioned, there are many people saying yes, many people saying no. And let's see, mostly accounting, sales, customer service. All right, good. Data for operations. Excellent. All right, very good. Most of you will be looking at this for the first time, and some of you will be, this will be a good review and be gaining some confidence, I hope, and that's, I hope, for everyone as well. Notice down here at the bottom, we have the Mass Higher Metro North YouTube channel. So once this is over, go ahead and go to the YouTube channel, and if I have a chance later, I'll put that in the chat for you as well. This YouTube channel is free. It is part of Mass Higher Metro North Career Center, and we've put most of our recordings, some of our trainings on the YouTube channel so that you can go and review as well as learn new things as well. And here's our calendar. So if you're looking for any other classes, and I'll try to go over those classes at the end of this training as well. All right, so thank you so much for answering those questions. So today the topics are the if function, the nested if function, the VLOOKUP function, and the nested if and VLOOKUPs. And I have the if and the VLOOKUP functions on the YouTube channel, so you would go and take a look at these links, and you can review after this is over. Now, to be successful today, you really need to have some prior knowledge. Two things. Let's take a look on the left-hand side. I would say if you had knowledge of built-in formulas, copying formulas, using and performing absolute cell reference, and using range name commands, you are going to be fine today. If you're a little sketchy on some of these things, well, I'd say still stick around because you're still going to learn, and you're going to really be able to see how the ifs and the VLOOKUPs work, and then you can work on some of the things that you need some prior knowledge on, or getting more confident in those things. But you really, to be comfortable using ifs and VLOOKUPs, these are some of the things you need to know. And then look on the right-hand side. So when you have an if-then statement or a lookup statement, you really need to understand the logic. And so my goal today is not just to show you the steps, but it's also to give you the logic about why you would need to use an if and VLOOKUP. And that I think is really important, everyone. So that's why I say stick around. If this is just a little bit too advanced for you, or even too slow for you, still stick around because you are going to understand the logic on how to get to A to B or how to use the steps, the logical steps that you would need to work in an if and a VLOOKUP. And I think that's going to be important for you to learn and use in Excel. Now, the first function that we're going to go over today is an if function. An if function is an if-then. An if function lets you perform a calculation if the criteria that you tell Excel is true, and then it allows you to perform another calculation or another result if the criteria is false. So it's an if-then. If this particular criteria is true, do this. If this criteria is false, do this. And there are many reasons why you might want to use an if function. I have an example of an Excel spreadsheet, and I want to show you the results already, the logic. It's always nice to understand the big picture first. So let's take a look. I'm going to highlight this information. Let's take a look at Linda, David, Susan, Bruce, Jennifer, and Paul. These are salespeople. Now, they sell a product. I don't know what the product is. I didn't put it on here, but they bring in money into the company, and this is the sales. Now, there's no time frame here. This could be quarters, this could be months, this could be weeks, and of course, that would add to not the if-then function that we're going to be doing, but, to the logic of this spreadsheet as well. But here's the sales money that they bring in. Now, here's the logic. They'll get a 5% commission on their sales if they meet a quota of $20,000. So notice over here, I've written the language again. Give a 5% commission, and I'm going to give the 5% commission on the total sales. A lot of the times, if you're in sales, you only get the commission on the sales over the quota. We'll just make it easy today, and we'll give a commission on the total sales if they meet the quota of greater than, notice the greater than symbol here, greater than or equal to 20,000. Now, here's the thing that I was talking about earlier about the prior knowledge. Before you can create the formula that makes cells C3 and C, you should make cells C3 and C4 absolute. And I like to use the define name function to make these cells absolute. So if you've never heard of absolute before, look at the formulas training or come to the Excel formulas training when I give it again. I won't be giving it this month, but maybe next month. But I want you to take a look. These formulas are all looking at the 5% and the 20% in order to do a formula. So I need to make this 5% absolute and this 20% absolute. So in order to find out if they get a commission, I want you to notice, I'll show you how to make a cell absolute in just a moment using the range name function. But before we move on to that, I want you to notice, why did Susan not get a commission? Because she didn't meet the quota. And how about Paul? No commission because he didn't meet the quota. You're going to see that these people here, Linda and David, are true. They met the quota. They are going to get a 5% commission, and this is what the commission will be. Bruce and Jennifer, they met the quota. They're going to get a 5% commission, and this is the money that they'll get. Paul and Susan did not meet the quota, therefore I decided to put no commission in their cell. Actually, I told Excel to do that. And I'm going to show you how to create what we call the if function. Watch when I double click on this cell right here. We're going to learn to create this if function. If C9 is greater than or equal to the quota, and 20,000 is the quota, take the commission, which in this case is 5%, and multiply it by C9. C9 happens to be the sales for Susan. And then if this is not true, I like to see no commission in their cell. So you're going to see that there are different options that I could have used here for the false piece, and I'll go over that. But this is what an if function looks like, and this if function is in each one of these cells, looking at the sales, comparing it with the quota, and if they sell greater than or equal to 20,000, then they'll get a commission of 5% of that sales. So here's the logic. Now let's take a look at how to do it. So down the bottom here, I have this formulas tab that I'm going to go to that does not, it has the information, same as the previous logic tab down here, but I'm going to show you how to create the formula as well as how to name these cells first. You see, you want all of these cells to absolutely be looking at the 5% in the if function formula that we're going to do. And you want all of these cells in the if function formula that we're going to do. We want them all to look at the 20,000 as well. All these formulas need to look absolutely at these two numbers. So before, please notice over here on the right-hand side again, before you can create the formula, you should make cells C3 and C4, in this case, the 5% and the 20,000. You should make them absolute. And how? I like to use the define name function. So I'm going to demonstrate this quickly. This is prior knowledge that I would really advise you to have, but if you've never seen this before, don't blink. I'm going to show you right now. So I'm going to come up here to the Formulas tab off of the ribbon of Excel, and I'm using version 2016. This can be done in 10, 13, 16, or 19, or even Office 365. So I'm going to click on the 5%. I just want you to notice over here in the name box, it says C3. C3 is the cell address. I want to change that to give this a name to make it absolute. So I'm going to go to the Formulas tab. I'm going to go to this button right here called Define Name. Define Name has a down arrow beside it. I'm not going to click on the down arrow. I'm going to click on the button that says Define Name. Now what pops up, let me see here. I need to do one thing real quick. Let me go to Name Manager. All right, and I'm just going to delete a couple of things before I move on so that there's no problems here. All right, very good. All right, I do want you to notice formulas once again. Define name. Notice this time this dialog box pops up. Do you see the word commission here? I did not type that. I want you to know that Excel helps you. It will type the name of the cell if it sees that someone typed a label beside the cell or above the cell. That's where it got the word commission from. So it's naming this cell C3 commission. It's in the formulas tab, notice down here. Notice cell C3 has a $sign in front of the C and a $sign in front of the 3. A $sign in a formula, in a cell address, means absolute. We're giving this cell a name called commission. I didn't have to type it, but I could type a name if I prefer to do and call it something else. Right now, I'm going to click OK. And I want you to notice in the name box, I'm on cell C3. It used to say cell C3 there before, and now it says commission because I named it. Therefore, this cell is now absolute. So when I use it in a formula, it'll always know to go to cell C3, which has been named commission, which is now absolute. Let's do it again for the 20,000. So if you're new to this, you always click on the cell that you want to name. You go to the Formulas tab. You go to Define Name. Why does it have the word quota there, everybody? Because it saw the word quota labeled. Again, if I don't like that word quota, I can type usually one word with an underscore, 2 words. If I have more than one word, I can put an underscore in between. So you really only need to type one word up here. Notice quota was already typed because it saw this label. Thank you, Excel. Now take a look down here. The formulas tab, the cell address C4, the dollar signs mean it's absolute. I click OK. Notice it used to say C4 here. Once I click OK, it'll say quota. So before I do a formula, I should name the cells that I want all of these cells to look at because I'm going to do the first formula and then copy it. And when I copy it, I want wherever I copy the formula to make the formula always look at absolutely 5% and absolutely quota. So I name them and that makes them absolute. All right. Again, if that's foreign to you, if that's something that you'd like to learn a little bit more about, then again, more training on formulas would be a good thing for you. But stick around because you'll learn some great things as we continue. How many people have actually used range names before or absolutes before, maybe using the F4 key or typing in the dollar signs yourselves? Go ahead and put that in the chat for me so that I can see if you've had prior experience to naming cells. And of course, there's always going to be a mix. And so some people are saying yes, and some people are saying no. Some people are saying a long time ago. So again, thank you for answering me. I truly appreciate it. It just helps me to know that you're with me. So if you're saying no, that you've never seen absolutes before, again, you may want to revisit that and review that a little bit later, or sometime when you have more time, of course. Or take the formulas training, or take a look at the YouTube channel as well. All right, thank you for answering. Let's keep going. So now we're ready. Let's go back to the PowerPoint for a minute. We're ready to use the if function. Now the if function, I want you to know, is a built-in function. So notice over here on the right-hand side, you'll see me clicking in an empty cell. You'll see that I'm going to go to the Formulas tab. You'll see that I'm going to go to the Logic button. You'll see that I'll choose If. And number 5, you'll see that I will fill out the function window based on what I want to put as the logical test, the true, and the false, pertaining to that commissions document, that worksheet that I'm going to be using. Okay? So let's go back to this spreadsheet here, and let me show you how to do an if function. Remember the logic before we start. If Linda's sales is greater than or equal to the quota, if it's true, give her 5%. If it's false, we'll decide what to give. So here's the logic. Give a 5% commission on the total sales if they meet the quota. If they don't meet the quota, that's where you and I will decide what to give them. Okay? All right, let's try it. We're going to go to the Formulas tab. Here's the Logic button, has a question mark on a book. There's the Logic button. Notice there's If right here, so we're going to click on If. Notice this dialog box that pops up. This dialog box has 3 boxes that we need to tell Excel what to do in. The first is called the logical test. We used to call it the condition. What is the condition that needs to be met? What is the test that needs to be looked at or performed in order to figure out if it's true, do this, if it's false, do this? So here's the test, and watch what I'm going to do. The if right here is understood, and I'm going to ask you not to look here and not to look here. Look here with me, and then as I go over to the worksheet. So the logical test, I say to myself, if, and I say, what do I need to show Excel? If, watch when I click on C7. I want to show Excel, I'll do Linda's sales. Notice what Excel does is it types C7 for me. The test is if Linda's sales is, notice, I'm going to put a greater than and an equals right here in this function arguments box which we call this text box that popped up. The logical test is if C7 is greater than or equal to what? The quota. Now I'm going to go to the 20,000 and click on it, and because I named it, because I already made it absolute, it says quota. And that is all I need to do here in the logical test. I don't click OK because I'm not done. I have 2 other lines to do. So if C7 is greater than or equal to the quota. All right, now what do we want to do if it's true? We want to give them a 5% commission on their total sales. That's what we've decided. So we have to show Excel the math. Notice when I click right here on 5%. What does Excel do? It types in the name of the cell that I used to make this absolute. It types in commission. I'm going to type a star, which means multiplied, and I'm going to click on the 22,000 for Linda, which Excel types C7. Now I could have typed C7 myself, but I like to click and show you. The true would be commission, which is 5% at this time, times C7. Now, if it's false, if they don't meet the quota, take a look at some of the choices that I could give. I could just type a 0. I could type 1% times their sales. Maybe I only give them a 1%. I could type words, no commission this time. Whatever you decide to type, you can certainly do that in the false piece. Now, you don't have to put quotes around it, but when I click OK and I copy this down, now if you're not familiar with the fill handle is at the bottom right of every cell. And if I point my mouse to that fill handle, it'll turn to a black plus sign, which I'm going to drag down to copy down to Paul. And notice Susan, no commission, and Paul, no commission, because the quota is 20,000 at this time, and they did not meet that quota. I want to show you a couple of things before we make some changes. I'm going to click in cell D7, where I originally did the formula. I'm going to come up to formulas, click on this insert function button, which has an F and an X on it, and it'll bring the function arguments window back up so I can see what I did. The logical test is if C7 is greater than or equal to the quota. If it's true, take the commission of 5%, multiply it by the sales, which is in C7. If it's not true, give them no commission. Notice the quotes now. Anytime I type, I don't have to put it in quotes, but once I click OK and look at the formula once again, you will see that Excel puts quotes around words because this is literally what you want to have show up in the cell. If I needed to make any changes, I would make some changes here and click OK and copy them down again. This formula worked. Here are the 2 people that have no commission. Why? Because the quota is 20,000. Now, let's change the quota real quick to 30,000. And many people will not get a commission. Only 2 people will get a commission. Let's change the commission to 15,000. And now everyone gets a commission. Let's put it back to 20,000. And just Susan and Paul do not get a commission. Now, when I wanted to see the window with the dialog box with the formula, I click on a cell, I go to formulas, I click on the FX button, and this pops up. This helps me know which is the logical test, which is the value that's true, or the formula to do to find out if it's true, and this is false. Now, that's not the only way to look at a formula. You probably all know that in the formula bar, you will see the truth about what's in a cell. I love the formula bar. Notice I'm looking at cell D7. It'll always give me the results in the cell. It'll always give me the formula in the formula bar. So this is one way of looking at the formula. And one more. If I double click, here's another way of looking at the formula right in the cell address. So I'll hit escape right now, and I will show you this formula. This is, I'm going to copy it. I'm going to paste it down here. And don't worry, let's see if I can paste. And don't worry if I get an error message real quick. Hold on. Whoop. Let me paste it. And then let me put a space in front of it so you can see it. All right, let's take a look at this. If C7 is greater than or equal to quota, what's the true? Notice a comma separates the logical test from the true. Commission times C7, that's the true. A comma, this is the false. Those are the three pieces of an if function. So you can look at this formula three ways. You can click on the formula and go to the FX button off of the Formulas tab and see it as we created it. You can look in the formula bar, or you can double click in the cell and see the formula and then hit escape. I just copied and pasted here so that you're able to see this formula. Any questions? Now this is a basic if function. We can make it a little bit more complicated. We can use different examples, of course. Anybody have a question that you'd like to put in the chat? So I'm taking a look at the chat. One of my questions would be, what would you use an if function for? Do you have an example of what you might want to say to Excel and create in Excel? If this, then this. Grades, somebody says. Excellent. All right, still looking. So for example, spec sheets, okay. I'd maybe need a little bit more information. Dates, all right, very good. So let's take a look at some other examples. Maybe using it in payroll, somebody mentions it, sure. All of these are great examples. Now you will see that I'm going to use an example for grades when I use a Vlookup table, which is again an addition to using an if function. Maybe, for example, let's talk quick about donations. And so if somebody donates $100, they're going to be a major player, major giver. And a lot of the times, those of you that are maybe working with, or maybe on a team to raise money for a particular disease, it might be, a lot of the times you'll get a t-shirt or a hat depending on how much you raise. So let's say we have Joe, Mary, Sally, Harry. And this is the money that they donate. And we want to know if they're going to get, for example, the prize. And the prize might be a t-shirt. So maybe we're sending t-shirts, hats, whatever. So I just want a yes or no in this column to see if they've actually met. They have to raise $100. They have to donate $100 in order to get the t-shirt. So first of all, I'm going to come up here to this 100 and I'm going to show you once again, formulas, define name, and I'm going to give this a name. And so remember I said you could do 2 words up here, 3 words up here, as long as you put an underscore. So I'm going to say, let's say donation, um, let me see. This is the, can't even think of the word. I will say donation underscore met. So we have to meet this donation. So I'll say donation meet. And I'll click OK. So this is the name of this cell here. So now I'll go here and I'll do the if function. All right. So take a look. Even though this may not be anything that you would ever do, it's a very simple experience and good way of just typing something in, naming a cell, and trying the if function. So let's go to formulas, logical, if, dialog box pops up, logical test, if is understood. If this 120 that Joe has donated is greater than or equal to, notice I'm putting greater than symbol and equal to this donation that we need to meet. If it's true, then yes, they'll get a t-shirt. If it's false, then no, they won't. I'll click OK and copy this down. So far, the only person that's getting a t-shirt is Joe. Make sense? And if we say, oh, Harry's was supposed to be 140 or Mary's was supposed to be 189, somebody misread that and put the wrong number in, now it changes to yes. So there could be discounts on anything. So if they buy a certain amount of money, so this could be sales, this could be if they buy, they'll get a discount. If they work overtime, what happens? If they meet on a certain day, then they get this particular, whatever it might be. So if then, so always think about an if, a then, an if then, if it's true, and if then, if it's false. That's what an if function is. So any questions before we move on and learn a little bit more about if functions? So notice I've given you a slide here while you're typing possibly. Let's take a look at this slide. So the if function has 3 parts: the logical test, what should happen if the logical test is true, tell Excel what will happen if the logical test is false. You're comparing 2 cells in this logical test. You're comparing if the logic is true or the logic is false, and if what to do in each case. So let's go back and take a look real quick at this spreadsheet here. Here's the spreadsheet, and the logical test once again is if Linda's sales is greater than or equal to the quota. If it's true, 5% times the 22,000 for Linda's sales. If it's false, no commission. We did this once. Let me just remind you, we did the formula once. We then copied it down so that it absolutely looks at the sales, which is 1 cell to the left, and absolutely these 2 cells here. Any number you want to change, you certainly can change, and the commissions would then follow. How are you feeling about an if function so far? All good to keep going? All right, here we go. Now, there is something called a nested if function. That means that you can put an if function inside an if function. And you can actually put 60, I think it's 64 if functions inside each other. So you can have 64 ifs You can also use or and and. So you can nest if functions. You can also combine if functions with or and functions, which are called conditions. So I want you to take a look at this middle of the screen, if or. Look at all that. What does that mean? I'll show you a spreadsheet in just a moment. But you can nest if functions. You can put one if function inside each another. So notice at the top here, nested if functions is 2 or more and up to 64 if statements in one formula. So let me go back though and make sure you understand right here. There's only one false that you can put when you nest if functions. One if, 2, 3. Let me see. Did I count that right? 1, 2, 3 ifs, 3 trues, and only one false. So when you nest an if function, you're going to be able to put 64 ifs, 64 what happens if it's true, and only one to do if any of these 64 things are false. So let me just give you some logic here. I want you to take a look at this screen. So I have Jones, Smith, Black, Brown, Burrows, Chandler, and these are their scores, and I want to figure out what grade I'm going to give them. Now, here is a scale that I'm going to use. Let me just say this. This scale is not something that is going to be used in the formula like it will be in a VLOOKUP. So you'll see nested if functions are long and involved and cumbersome. But you'll see that I'll use something very similar to this when I go and show you a VLOOKUP. So you might be shaking your head and say, oh, nested if functions are terrible. Just remember, I have to show you nested if functions. They're part of Excel, and you might be working with someone who loves nested if functions and uses them. I'm going to tell you soon that using a VLOOKUP function is going to be a better alternative to using a nested if function. So keep that in mind, but still learn with me. So I want you to notice, I'm going to go to let's see, where is it? Here we go. Here's the nested if functions for grades spreadsheet. Here it is completed. Remember, I always want you to understand the logic. Take a look. Using the scale to compare the student's score to what letter grade matches. Now, I want you to notice 0 to 63. Anyone who got a 0 to 63 would get an F. Anyone who got between a 64 and a 72 would get a D. Anyone who got between a 73 and an 84 would get a C. So I want you to notice I have two people that got a C here because their grade was between 73 and 84. Now, anyone who got an 85 to 94, notice 85, 92, these people got a B. And anyone who got a grade between 95 and 100 will get the letter grade as an A. This is done. A scale for your eyes is just for your eyes. This scale is used when I go to create a nested if function. Not these cells, but the idea of this. So the knowledge of this. So this data is a scale for display only. Later, you're going to see it's going to be important use when we do a VLOOKUP. All right. Notice you know the 3 parts are the logical test. So nest 64 ifs together, but only showing 1 false. 64 ifs, 64 trues, 1 false. Now, you don't have to use 64, but you can use up to 64 ifs in a nested if function. And here's the thing about doing that. I want you to take a look right here as I've highlighted. Nested if functions you actually type in, and you must know where to put the commas and where to put the quotes. And open parentheses are important in a nested if function. So if you're shaking your head, don't jump off, because I'm going to show you VLOOKUPs which are better than nested if functions. Nested if functions are available, they're used. They have a limitation of 64 ifs. VLOOKUPs, you will see, have a better way of creating the nested if function. And then later in the month, I'm going to be doing an XLOOKUP, which is the replacement, not necessarily replacement, but the better choice if you have certain criteria to use beyond a VLOOKUP. So keep that in mind. We're going to get to the VLOOKUP in just a moment, but I wanted to make sure that you understood, because you might be working with somebody else's spreadsheet that they email you and look in the formula bar and be going, what is this? And so notice it says if B2. Where is B2? Well, let's take a look. That's the 92 for Jones. If B2 is less than 64, comma, that's the first if function. Here's the true, give them an F, and it's in quotes, a comma. If, open parenthesis again, if B2 is less than 73, there's the logical test, put a comma, give them a D, in quotes, comma. Here comes another if. If B2 is less than 85, comma, that's the logical test, here's the true, C, in quotes. Here comes another if. If B2 is less than 95, what do they get? A B. What's the false? An A, which means if none of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, if conditions, if true, if this logical test is met and it's true, if none of these are true, then that means they'll get an A. That's a nested if function. And that nested if function is right here in this cell. Look in the formula bar. Here it is. If B2 is less than 64, get an F. If B2 is less than 73, get a D. If B2 is less than 85, get a C. If B2 is less than 95, get a B. If not, you get an A. Now, we don't need this on the screen, everybody. We don't need this scale on the screen. I just left it there so that you could understand, where is this idea, where is this logic coming from? This logic is coming from a scale that you would get from the school system, let's say you work for, or if you're teaching adults or teaching in a training center, this would be the idea of what is the normal average way of scoring tests or scoring and giving someone a grade. So what do you think about a nested if function? What do you think about typing all that? You think a mistake could be made when you type all of this? Absolutely. And so a lot of the times you have to remember, notice there are 1, 2, 3, 4 parentheses at the end of this if function. You always have to put the number of parentheses at the end as there are the words if. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 ifs, therefore 4 parentheses at the end. Can we use a, so when you're using an if function, you can go in any direction that you want. Somebody wants to know, so notice I put an F first, then a D, then a B, then an A. You can go in any order that you want. You could have done if B2 is greater than this, then get a B, and greater than this, get a C. So you can go in that order. When you're doing an VLOOKUP, you're going to see that we have to go in A to Z or lowest to highest order. But in an if function, you can put it any way that you want. All right. Any other questions? Feel free to type those in. So you'll get these slides In these slides, we'll give you this example. And notice, I really like to make sure that you understand right now when you're doing a nested if, this data is just for display. The data is not used in the formula when creating a nested if function. You just have to know this information in order to tell Excel what to do. So I always like to visually show you what I'm thinking so that when I create the if function, you will understand the logic. Now, I'm going to go back previous. Remember I mentioned to you that a nested if function can also be put with an or and an and condition. So I wanted you to understand what a nested if function was and then how to combine it with an or an and. So I want you to notice the or function allows you to check two or more different conditions using the if function, but it's an if or. So let's take a look at a spreadsheet that you might gain some knowledge of. Now, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so that you can understand. All right, I'd like you to take a look with me right here. This is a completed spreadsheet. I'd like you to take a look right here. Brown, Jones, Smith, Black, Stone, and Green are salespeople. They sold a product January, February, and March. This is a formula that totals up January, February, and March. This is a column where we want to put in an if-or statement. Why? Let's look at the logic here. Here's the logic. One of the 3 months, January, February, or March, one of them during the first quarter sales must be greater than or equal to the monthly sales quota based on the scale. Where is the scale? Here's a scale for your eyes right here. Again, this scale is for your eyes. I want you to see that if their sales 1 month at least, they sold between 1,001 and 1,500, they'll get a 3% commission on their sales. If they sell 1,501 to 2,000, they'll get a 4% commission on their sales. So the more they sell, the higher the commission. In this case, if they sell between 2,001 to 2,500 or over, they get a 5% commission. One of these three numbers, January or February or March, that's where the or is going to come in. This formula is not easy to type in. I put it down here so that you could see. So this formula is in this cell right here, and then I copied it. Okay. So why does Brown get a 5% commission? Let's take a look. If or B5 is greater than 2001, comma, take a look, C5 greater than 2001, comma, D5 greater than 2001, give them 5%. So what are these cell addresses? B5, C5, D5. If B5, C5, or D5 is greater, if the sales is greater than 2001, they get a 5% commission. Now let's take a look at this right here. If or B5 is greater than 1501, C5 is greater than 1501, greater than or equal to actually. D5 is greater than or equal to 1501, give them a 4%. And here's another if or. So if B5 is greater than or equal to, if the sales is greater than or equal to 1001 in B5, C5, or D5, then give them 3%. And if none of these ifs, there are three ifs, if none of these logical tests match or fall in between, give them 0. All right, so for example, if I change these numbers to 90, 100, 500, they'll get nothing, 0, nothing, no commission. Okay, I'm going to hit undo and put it back. So an if or, again, you can put if or 64 times nested within a one if function. I have 1, 2, 3 ifs. Therefore, I have 3 closing parentheses at the end. I have if, a parenthesis, or. If this, or this, or this, if B5, or C5, or D5 is greater than or equal to 2001, give them 5%. If B5 or C5 or D5 is greater than or equal to 1501, then give them 4%. If B5 or C5 or D5 is greater than 1001, give them 3%. If none of that is true, give them 0. So I tried to put this scale here for just your eyes so that it would make sense to you where I got this idea of using these numbers. This is all typed out. You have to know where to put the commas, quotes if needed, parentheses. It's not easy to do, but it's doable. But you may want to use a Vlookup instead of a nested if. And again, we're going towards that. We're going to be starting that in just a moment. So let's take a look at the slides that you're going to get. You can combine nested if functions with or and. A nested if function, you can have 64 if statements in one formula. You can have 64 ifs, 64 trues, but only one false. I use this for grades because I think it's something we all can understand. A nested if function can be a little difficult to put into a cell. If you're not typing it correctly, you'll keep getting error messages. So what is the alternative? The alternative would be to use a VLOOKUP, which I'll show you in just a moment. Any questions about a nested if function with an or, an and, or just plain nested? How many people have used a nested if function before or have seen one? Go ahead and let me know that in the chat. What was it about? Was it emailed to you? Did you create it? I'd love to know that. And while you might be typing in the chat, please continue to do so. I'll click the mouse and give you this example. Remember, I always try to give you on the slides the example that I used. So some of you were trying to take screenshots possibly, or type in this information to Excel. It's a little too much while you're watching this presentation. So if you want to practice this, create something similar if you like, and go ahead and create the if function to help you with the or just the nested to help give you just, again, some confidence in using these. So somebody said their manager always used a nested if function and expected them to understand them, and sometimes people struggle with them. So hopefully this is, again, helping you understand you have to know the logic behind the formula. If you can look at a formula and really say, okay, this data, this information on the spreadsheet, I understand the logic. Now let's tell Excel what to do. That'll really help you in creating these combinations of ifs and just plain if functions as well. But again, you'll get this at the end of this training. Okay, I think we're ready to go on to a VLOOKUP. And notice I put in black here, use a VLOOKUP instead of a nested if. But the thing about a VLOOKUP, I would like you to look right here. Remember, we've been looking at a scale all the way along, right? And notice the scale that we use is going to be important now in a VLOOKUP. It's going to be necessary. Let me just explain what I was previously saying. This scale here, then when we worked with a combined if function, when we were looking at the grades, was just for you to see and understand, right? When we do a VLOOKUP though, this is going to be part of the spreadsheet. This has to be done from a smallest to largest order, always. And it can be many columns and it can be many rows. So I want you to think about this. How many columns and how many rows do you have in a spreadsheet? You have 16,000 plus columns and 1,048,000 plus rows. How many ifs could you put in a nested? You could only put 64. Oh, in a VLOOKUP, you could use as many columns and as many rows as you want that are available to you on a spreadsheet to put in, for example, any scores or any discounts or any information you want with results. Now notice this is 2 columns and this is several rows. This could be a scale that I use for looking up grades. This is a vertical list going from 0 to 95, always smallest to largest. And I'm going to be able to tell Excel, look at this formula. I'm giving you the big picture, everybody. A VLOOKUP, V means vertical. B2, let's say that you're not looking at a spreadsheet yet, but let's say you have a number to compare in cell B2. I'm going to name this whole scale grades and get the column 2 from, I'm going to get the answer, I should say, from column 2. So notice it says when you're dealing with scales, continuous ranges and numerical values, a VLOOKUP is really the best. You make this reference table. We call it the VLOOKUP table. You've got the variables. You want to have it from smallest to largest, ascending order. You're going to build the formula based on this scale. So whatever scale you decide to create, you create it in the workbook that you're using to create the VLOOKUP. Now, I'm trying to give you the big picture of the VLOOKUP so that when I get into it, you'll have some prior knowledge. So I'm going to use the commissions again. I'm going to use the grades again so that I can show you a VLOOKUP. And you're going to be able to put in 3 things into the VLOOKUP: the lookup value, the table array, and the column index number. And I'll come back and really show you what these mean in just a moment when I'm demonstrating. So I'm going to go back over to the, let's see, which one should I use? I think I'll do the grades. Everybody take a look. You see this scale? What I want you to understand is this scale is 0 to 60, 60 to 65, 65 to 70. Excel will know what numbers are in between. So in this case, if anyone gets a 60 to a 64, they get a D minus. A 65 to a 69, basically, they'll get a D. A 70 to a 74, they'll get a C minus. A 75 to a 79, they'll get a C. An 80 to an 84, they'll get a B minus. 85 to 89, they'll get a B. 90 to 94, they'll get an A minus. 95 and above, they'll get an A. This scale can be 1,048,000 rows long. It can be as wide as many columns. In this case, I'm only using 2 columns to show you a very simple formula in order to use the VLOOKUP. Now I want you to notice the logic down here. Scores and grades have been placed, and I would give them a name. I would make this absolute. So I would make this scale absolute, and I already called it grades. So again, I'll show you how to make one cell and a group of cells, in this case absolute again. The VLOOKUP function will look at cell B2. we're going to tell Excel to look at cell B2. So Jones's grade, they got a 62. Then we'll tell Excel, we won't actually say compare B2 with the first column. It is built into the VLOOKUP. But we're going to the logic is, all right, take a look at cell B2, compare it with what grading scale that I give you. In this case, it's grade, so it's a grading scale, I'll call it. And the VLOOKUP will look at whatever column I tell it. Column 2. This is column 2 where I want Excel to look and get the grades and put them where I put the formula. So let's do it. Let's go to the Formulas tab down here at the bottom so that I can show you. 0F down to 95A. We want to make this absolute. So I highlight this. Now, don't look at what I'm going to do. I'm going to delete something real quick so that I can show you from scratch. Some of you have jumped in a little late, so I want to make sure you highlight. You go to the Formulas tab. You go to Define Name. You type in the name of these columns and rows that what you want to call this. So remember, you can only use one word, so I'm going to call this grading underscore scale. That's what I think I'll call it, grading scale. This is my VLOOKUP, my vertical list. Notice down here, F3 to G11 is made absolute when I click OK. So I always have to make the grading scale or the scale that I'm using for commissions or whatever it is that I'm using it for, discounts, whatever. I make it absolute. Then I go and do the formula. So I'm here in cell C2, and I'm going to go find the VLOOKUP. I'm going to go to the Formulas tab on the ribbon and look in this button that has a book with a magnifying glass on it. It's called Lookup and Reference. And these functions go in alphabetical order. So I am going to go down here to VLOOKUP. Now, when I click on VLOOKUP, notice I'm going to move this back over here so that you can see what I'm doing. Notice there are 4 lines of text. 3 are bolded, I should say, and the bolded ones are the ones that we're going to use. And I'm going to go back and forth between my PowerPoint presentation so that first, whoops, sorry about that. Let me go back a slide. So first we can look up, what does lookup value mean? We're going to type in the cell address or click on the cell address that has the value you want Excel to compare with the first column of your VLOOKUP table. So let's go back. So I'm in cell B2. I went to the lookup, VLOOKUP. I'm right here. What is my lookup value? I want Excel to take this cell B2. I could have typed B2 or I can click on it. I want it to take B2 and compare it with this grading scale. So all I do is click on the cell that I want Excel to first look at. Then I click here in Table Array. What does Table Array mean? Well, let's go back to the PowerPoint for a moment. The Table Array is the name of the VLOOKUP table that you created that is somewhere in your workbook, and I happen to put it right beside on my spreadsheet. Now, notice it says click in the Formulas tab, click on the Use in Formula button, and click on the name. What does that mean? Let's go back and take a look. So right here, I could type grading underscore scale, which is the name of my text and numbers that I highlighted and gave a name to. It's my grading scale. I don't like to type though. I might make an error. So instead, I click here on Table Array, I come up to the Formulas tab as the instructions tell me. I go to Use in Formula. That's a button that I'm going to click on, which are going to give me a list of all the names, all the cells that have been named. In grades was one. Grading scale is what I used to name this grading scale with the scores and the grades on them. I click on grading scale and it types it for me here, which is much easier than me typing. Now, column index number is the third row. What do I do now? Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Column, COL means column, index, NUM means number. You are going to type in the column number from the VLOOKUP table where you want Excel to get the answer from. So let's go take a look at this spreadsheet again. What column over here, column 1 or column 2? Not F and G anymore. No letters are we using, we're using numbers. I want Excel to get the answer from column 2 because there could be many columns and many rows. The rows are understood from 0 in this case to 95 because it's part of the grading scale. Which column in the grading scale do you want to get the answer from? I type in a 2. I type in the number of the column, not the column letter. Now I don't have to do range lookup. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to copy this down and notice a 62 is a D minus, an 85 is a B, a 92 is an A minus, a 75 is a C, a 95 is an A, and a 92 is an A minus. Now, let's say that a grade is changed. Let's say this 92, they got some extra points and now it's a 98. Watch when I hit enter, look at this cell right here. It automatically changes to an A because a 95 and above is an A. Any changes you make to these numbers, here is your VLOOKUP formula. Remember, I can double click in a cell to see the formula. Let me hit escape. I can look up here in the formula bar to see the formula. And what's the next thing I can do to see the formula? I could go up to the Formulas tab, as we saw with the if function, and I can go to the Insert Function button, the FX button, and click, and up comes the dialog box that I used to tell Excel what to do. 3 ways to look at the formula, and maybe make an edit if you need to. So you can make conditions on blank rows, but you really should use a 0. If you have a blank row, put in a 0 somewhere, especially in a VLOOKUP, as well as using the ifs and prior to the formulas that we used before. So here is a VLOOKUP. Okay, so take a look. I'm going to do it again. Some of you have a couple of questions, so I want you to pay close attention to this and see if, when you try it again, if it works. But just watch mine first, if you wouldn't mind. I like to try it a couple of times anyways for everybody. So I always click in an empty cell. Prior to me doing the formula, I already named this. Notice here, grading scale. Now I click in the empty cell, formulas, lookup and reference, VLOOKUP. I like to use the dialog box. The lookup value, I'm going to click on this number 62 to show Excel where it is. It's in cell B2. I click where it says table array. I don't like to type. I come up to the formulas tab. I have to be in this dialog box, and use in formula will be right here in the defined names group. It'll be alive and well waiting for me to use. And then I can click on the name that I gave those columns and rows in this case, grading scale. Then I go to column index to number and put a 2 here because there are 2 columns. And I want column 2 to be where they get the letter grade from. I click OK and I copy it down. So when you do a VLOOKUP, you need a physical, visible scale. You can use as many rows and as many columns as you want. And you create the VLOOKUP based on your scale that you created. Now, there are going to be times where you may have more than one professor, let's say. So I'll say Professor Jones and Professor Smith. And these people have taken Professor Jones' class, and they've taken Professor Smith's class. And now Professor Smith grades a lot easier than Professor Jones, let's say. So if you get a 60, you get a D. You get a 65, you get a D. You get a 70, you get a C. You get a 75, you get a C. There's no minuses. You just get a B if you got an 80 to an 85. And you got an A. And there are no minuses. So everybody gets an A between 90 and 95 and above. So here's the grading scale. And if you get a 0, you're still going to get an F in Professor Smith's class. Now, this grading scale now has 3 columns. Do you see it? So I am going to go and rename this. I'll delete it and show you once again how to make this absolute. And then we'll do the 2 formulas once again. So now I highlight all of my columns and all of my rows, and I go back to formulas, define name. The dialog box pops up, and I'm going to type grading scale. I like that name. Remember, you can only use one word, so I use an underscore to connect the 2 words, grading scale. It's easier for me to read. All of these cells, F3 through H11, are now absolute. So now I'm ready to do the formula. I always make the cells absolute in my scale first, and then I'm ready to do the formula. So here I go. I'm going to do Jones again. Formulas, lookup and reference, Vlookup. So this is kind of a long way of finding them, but I always like you to see where they are on the ribbon. I like you to use the dialog box that pops up, so the function argument box. So the lookup value is 62. The table array, I'm going to go to use in formula off of the formulas tab, is grading scale. That includes the 3 columns this time because I renamed it. The column index, so Professor Jones is still column 2. I click OK. I copy it down. If you look at Jones's and you compare, these are the right grades. Now, this person, Jones, is a student, and maybe I should change that name to, let's say, Callahan. So Callahan's a student, got a 62 in Jones's class. That's a D minus. Got a 62 in Professor Smith's class. Let's see what that is. Let's do the VLOOKUP again. Lookup and reference off of the formulas tab, VLOOKUP. The lookup value is still B2, which is the 62. The table array, everyone, is still the same. Grading scale. The only thing that changes is where am I going to get the grade for Professor Smith in the grading scale, column 3 this time. I click OK, and now you will see everyone gets a solid grade, no minuses as well, because this scale is always used, I should say, in the first row, first column. This column, column 2, is used for Jones. Column 3 is used for Smith. What do you think? You like a VLOOKUP much better than a nested if? I would have to say yes. Are you getting the logic behind a VLOOKUP function? So the name manager button should be there. I don't know why you're not seeing it. Someone asks that they don't have it. You could go to, in Excel, you could go to the Quick Access Toolbar button. And if you're not sure how to do this, Google it. Quick Access Toolbar button, More Commands, All Commands, and look for the button to add it to your Quick Access Toolbar. Okay? So looking for command in Excel would be looking at the Quick Access Toolbar, More Commands, and All Commands. Once you find All Commands, you're looking through the commands. They go in alphabetical order. You can find the command and add it to your Quick Access Toolbar if it's not on your ribbon. Okay. All right, let's take a look at what else we can learn in the next 5 minutes before we start wrapping this up. You can combine VLOOKUPs and if functions. I love this. You can have, notice right here, an if with a VLOOKUP inside it. So let's take a look at this. So here is an example. I want to make it a little bit bigger. All right. So notice, here's the logic. If the sales associated with an employee name in the VLOOKUP table, which is D4 to E8, which I'll show you, is greater than 2,500, then yes, they're going to get a bonus. So look right here. This is the VLOOKUP table. I named it sales. Do you see it in the name box? I went to formulas, define name, and named this sales. This is the VLOOKUP. Here, I just type somebody's name. This is just an empty cell that I would use. And I want to know, based on these people's names right here that I might type in, will they get a bonus? If in the VLOOKUP table, notice G4. G4 is where I'm going to type the name. If this name compared to sales, which is the name of this VLOOKUP table, if you find in column 2 that it's greater than 2,500, put a yes. If not, put a no. You're combining an if with a VLOOKUP. Let's take a look. Here is, notice right here, this formula. If the VLOOKUP, which is sales, notice it's in red, and this is in red as well. This is the VLOOKUP called sales. If G4, notice it's blue, and this is blue. If G4 matches the names in sales, and then you look at column 2, notice the number 2 here, and that number is greater than 2,500, then put yes, they get a bonus. I don't know what bonus they're going to get. I haven't determined that. I just want to know if they get one. All right, so let's type a name here. Sam Black. Hit enter. Nope. Why? Look at Sam Black's information from the gradings, from this lookup value here, from this sales scale. It is less than 2,500. Let's type in, let's say, Carol Lane. Yes. Let's type in James Chen. No. Now, can you copy and paste? I'm going to take Lisa Jones and right-click and copy and paste into this cell. And it does work, so you can copy and paste. So you can combine ifs and VLOOKUPs, and they really do give you quite a good option when you have a list and you want to see if that list either matches something or is greater than or is less than. So you combine the if with the VLOOKUP. And then you get to put a true and a false. What to do if it's true, what to do if it's false. And this false right here is only from the VLOOKUP table. When we do a VLOOKUP table, let me just go and show you real quick, I should say. Let's see. There's always the range lookup, which can give you a true or false option at the end. So that's why this is there. What do you think? Let's go back to the PowerPoint. So I've given you this choice, given you this example. You can use the if and VLOOKUP together, nesting the VLOOKUP function inside the if. Sorry, this is covering, but that says if function. When you have a VLOOKUP inside an if, you can have it return a true or false or yes or no. In this case, that's what we used. And you're nesting an if, a VLOOKUP inside an if. What do you think? You think you can use this? Try it. Use an example similar to this if you like. Now, I have some resources for you. And one of the resources would be the Mass Hire Metro North Career Center YouTube channel, which I'm going to put into the chat in just a moment. I'm going to go copy it and put it into the chat. Hold on a second. All right. Here we go. So this is the free Mass Hire. I'm just typing it in. Metro North YouTube channel, where you can go and watch a bunch of videos. We also have Microsoft support, and I love this Excel trick for VLOOKUPs and Excel if statements. These are two good websites to go to as well. So someone's asking about the false in the VLOOKUP. Let me explain that again. Let me just go back for a second. So this false right here, when you're nesting a VLOOKUP inside an if, you have to use all four boxes. Remember when we did the VLOOKUP, we only used 3. So let's go back if I can. We only used the 3 and lookup value, table array, column index number, but there's a fourth box when you're using a VLOOKUP, and you have to use that fourth box when you are combining the VLOOKUP and the if, and that will bring out a false or a true. You can ignore it, but you have to fill it out, and you'll see that when you go and fill out that VLOOKUP when you nest it inside an if. So it really means nothing, but it's the fourth box when you're filling out the VLOOKUP. All right, so sorry, time is up. Just wanted to remind you that we're doing an Excel basic pivot table and an advanced pivot table this month, as well as an Excel charts. So Excel pivot tables, if you've never used pivot tables before, I would highly recommend that you watch the database tutorial on our YouTube channel. So if you do not know anything about databases, it would be hard to jump into maybe what a pivot table is. But again, quickly, if you go to our YouTube channel that I just put into the chat and watch some of the Excel database, I think I have 2 or 3 of them there. You'll be all ready to take the Excel basic pivot tables. So I'd love to see you in the pivot tables and the charts and any of these other Word, file management, PowerPoint. Look at all the other ones that Nancy, Brendan, and Kelly, myself are doing this month, and sign up early so that we can teach you what you need to know while you're job seeking. So we'd love to have you join the October events, and you'll get this when I give you the file transfer in just a moment. All right, everybody, that brings me to the file transfer. What am I going to be doing? I'm going to be doing a file transfer, which allows me to give you the presentation that we used today. It's going to be automatic, and you're going to perform a couple of functions with me and download it to your PC. Just in case you're on an iPad or an iPhone and you're not able to download, Notice I'm going to put my email into the chat. That is where you're going to email me and ask me for this particular presentation. Try the file transfer first, please, so that you don't have to email me. But if you do email me, I'd like you to indicate your full name and your job seeker ID. Let me know what presentation you're looking for. Today was Excel ifs and VLOOKUPs, and I'll be able to email it to you if this download doesn't work. So I'm going to do the download. And before I do, I just want to show you the Cambridge, Chelsea, and Woburn phone numbers. In case you have additional questions, you can certainly call our centers. And thank you so much for joining me today. Don't jump off yet. I am going to stop sharing. Your screen's going to say Mass Higher Metro North or Metro North Career Centers in the middle. And I am going to go find the file that I want to transfer with you. And I want you to try it, see if it works. And if it doesn't work, of course, you'll email me. All right, let me go ahead and find it. There it is. So it's Excel if and VLOOKUP. It's a PDF file that I'm sending to you so that everyone will be able to open it. You're going to click once with your left mouse button and then click on download. Once you click on download, you'll answer yes to the first question, and then you'll be able to save it to the documents folder. Now, while you're doing this or while you're waiting, I'd love for you to put down in the chat what you thought about today's training. Did you feel that you learned some good things about the if and the VLOOKUP? Are you going to practice? I hope so. That's the best way to learn and keep it in mind. And it's been my pleasure to teach you the Excel if and VLOOKUP. Come once again at the end of the month when we do the XLOOKUP as well. I hope to see you then. And practice so that you are confident while you're job seeking. And I wish you the very best in your job search as well, and hope to see you again in some other trainings. So thank you again. I'm going to do some things behind the scene. It's already 11:30, so we got to shut this down in just a moment. But thank you. It's been my pleasure to be with you as well. And stay safe, stay healthy until we meet again. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.